Is climate change racist? Well, nobody is saying hurricanes, heat waves, or rising sea levels are prejudice, but we can't ignore the fact that people who've often been on the front line of climate-related disasters have been people of colour. Sadly, the reality is that the climate crisis has been impacting people of colour for years. There are a lot of complicated reasons as to why. The simple version is this. The lives of people in countries across Africa and Asia, as well as indigenous peoples all over the world, have been deliberately ignored and devalued by massive corporations and countries in the West for centuries. This is happening because a greater value has been placed on money and power than on some human lives. And this is not about the past. The climate crisis is still impacting different groups of people around the world with very different degrees of severity. Today, people who already hold less power around the world, like women and people of colour, are far more likely to experience the catastrophic effects of climate breakdown. When we say catastrophic, we're talking flooding, heat waves, drought, wildfires, rising sea levels, all of which ultimately make it difficult for people affected to access food, shelter, and other basic human needs. So what's the reason for this imbalance? Extreme effects of climate breakdown are mostly felt in developing countries like Indonesia, Colombia, and Kenya, often referred to as the Global South. The UN has recently said that there is, on average, one climate crisis disaster, like heat waves, storms, or flooding, occurring worldwide every week, and most of those are occurring in the Global South. The climate crisis is rarely mentioned as a cause of these disasters when they're reported on the news. But the truth is, extreme weather events are getting more frequent and intense as a result of climate breakdown. Just look at Bangladesh, which has been one of the countries hit hardest. Bangladesh's low-lying coast has meant that it's particularly prone to flooding and cyclones, and climate breakdown has meant these events are happening more often and more severely. In 2020, the country's coastline was battered by Cyclone Anthem, the most powerful cyclone it's faced in 20 years. It's estimated that by 2050, 1 in every 7 people there will have been displaced by climate change. And here's the kicker. The people most affected are also much less likely to have contributed to the problem in the first place. Researchers at Oxfam found that someone in the UK will take just 5 days to emit the same carbon as someone in Rwanda does in an entire year. By the 12th of January every year, the average Brit's emissions will have overtaken the annual per capita emissions of a further 6 African countries: Malawi, Ethiopia, Uganda, Madagascar, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. But this isn't about blaming people who occasionally forget to switch the kitchen lights off, or who take one family holiday a year. There are a handful of companies causing the vast majority of damage to the planet. In 2017, the Carbon Majors report identified 100 companies that had contributed to 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. Some of the worst offenders are BP, Shell, and ExxonMobil. Let's take a quick detour to see who's personally profiting from the climate crisis. Wow, the oil and automobile CEO community sure is a rich and diverse tapestry. In short, the global north, including countries like the US and the UK, is for the most part creating this mess, and the global south is having to deal with it. And the climate crisis isn't just happening far away, it's affecting communities right here in the UK. Black, African, and Caribbean people are exposed to higher levels of illegal air pollution than any other ethnic group in the UK. This isn't an accident. People of colour in Europe and North America are more likely to live in bad quality housing in built-up areas and are far more likely to work in industries where they're more exposed to pollution due to structural racism. So if we're serious about tackling racism and climate change, we should start to address the huge inequalities and injustices that people of colour face right here in the UK too. While people of colour in the Global South are at the front line of climate-related impacts, they've also been the first to resist environmental destruction. Indigenous knowledge has been key to conserving the planet so far. For thousands of years, people of colour have lived in harmony with nature by practicing sustainable farming and effective fire and waste management techniques, which are often more friendly to the planet than industrial solutions. They are also on the front line of the global fight to save the natural world. Although people of colour in the Global South have been champions of the planet for thousands of years, they now have fewer resources, like infrastructure, to deal with the impacts of the changing climate. The cause of this inequality is racism, which goes back hundreds of years. Something a lot of these countries have in common is long histories of colonial rule, during which their resources, land, and labour were stolen by European colonisers. Their thriving societies and economies were reshaped to benefit European empires, which means that the legacy of colonialism capitalism is alive and well today, from trade systems that have been set up to favour Western countries, to foreign and multinational corporations continuing to pillage local territories and resources in the global south through extractive industries like mining and fast fashion. These structural inequalities leave countries in the global south less able to deal with climate disasters when they happen. So race is a big factor in how people experience climate change. But the structural inequalities don't end there. Gender, sexuality, age, disability, and more can also play a part. The unfortunate truth is that the climate crisis is affecting people who are already marginalised far more. That means it's impossible for us to talk about the climate breakdown without talking about inequality, because one is crucial to our understanding of the other. We must call on governments and corporations to tackle the climate emergency urgently, and in the process, help to correct these ingrained inequalities to create better, more equal societies. So there we have it. Climate change isn't racist, but people still are. Politicians, corporations, and entire countries in the global north have been and continue to be responsible for people of colour paying the price for the climate emergency. That's why the climate crisis is a race issue. We can't win the fight against climate chaos without dealing with racism. Find out how you can take action. Click the links below and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching. Please share this video.